the day I leave my phone at home, I never go back to collect it. So whoever wants to connect with me, can connect me over email, can connect me over phone, landline phone in the office, and I'm very happy, reduced to my corner, working for the entire day without unnecessary disturbances.
Absolutely. No, no, completely agree with you. So again, once again, welcome to CXO today, and thank you for joining me. And
Thank you for having me.
I'd like to kind of first take one issue that you had raised, we discussed earlier, which was, you said that, the IoT adoption is at scale.
Correct.
Now, to me, scale, there are two dimensions to scale.
Mm-hmm.
One is that you go in depth into an enterprise.
Okay. Yes.
Right? Then, kind of connect everything and, connect into the entire shop floor, all the way to marketing automation and so on and so forth. That is one level. The other, to me, which is also equally interesting, is the breadth of a scale. How many enterprises, whether it's mid-sized companies or large companies or small companies who are adopting it. So when you say scale, which dimension are you referring to?
So just to give a perspective, I would combine your depth as well as the width of the scale to make it appear more institutionalized. So earlier, it would be more restricted to with respect to the success part of it. But now the machines or the internet, the digital infrastructure which was there. So the entire gamut of it being covered under the production scale itself is the institutionalization that I mean. So that's where I come from, mentioning that it's actually the entire dimension of it being covered, which covers the convergence, risk audits, supply chain security vettings, and also contractual hardening of the ecosystem. So,
Right.
so it's in the complete life cycle, if I may say that way.
But do you see adoption across small, mid-sized companies, small companies, or is that restricted essentially to large companies? Because I have a follow-up question on this.
So you're absolutely on the bullseye. With the scale with which the technological developments are happening and the risk that is increasing in proportion to that, or maybe even more, companies are finding it very difficult to actually upgrade the infrastructure on a regular basis. It's a huge cost, and that's where the ROI comes into place, and it becomes even more difficult when it comes to when it comes to the scale of mid-sized companies or startups. Uh, Things become a little more difficult when, from the compliance perspective, all these companies, irrespective of their size and structure, have to be compliant and regularly upgrade their infrastructure, the OT infrastructure. And that's where you're absolutely correct. The companies have a ROI, and that's the risk part, which I say that which we see that the companies at times would like to implement, but the implementation is either slow or adaptability a little, I'll say, cautious with respect to the cost of implementation of it.
And would
Yes.
that be typically in mid to small size companies? I mean, in your experience, would you say that?
Not very specifically, but yes. But even the larger companies, if I say the large manufacturing units, or they also have their own reservations in their own scale, because the quantum of information, data, as well as the infrastructure that needs to be controlled with the entire device structure, needs to be the entire ecosystem or the environment is a cost to the company. So, when irrespective of the size, everyone has a ROI to that. So, every company at its own stage would have their own challenges.
So, and then, I've been kind of been in this industry from the time, ERP and even pre-ERP situation, And oftentimes we have found that implementation hits a roadblock, especially in large companies, not because of issues within the company, but within the supply side. If the supplier is not fully automated as the principal is, then all the efforts of the principal to automate and then make sure that the supply chain is fully integrated doesn't work simply because the guy down the line does not have the capex to spend. Do you see that happening in IoT?
Yes, absolutely. Because you see, when we talk of the your query is mostly about the which concerns the ecosystem under which the company works,
Yes.
and irrespective if the company is a big company, it would have its vendors, suppliers, as well as customers who are of various in terms of sizes, in terms of production, in terms of market presence also. So
Right.
everyone would have their own set of challenges, and when this ecosystem is actually integrated, and that is where we find that the issues with respect to uh, uh, the coordination of the devices or the algorithmic the accountability is something
Mhm.
that comes into as a huge question mark. I may be compliant, but my vendors or my suppliers may not. And that's where, even as a principal employer or a principal contractor, I may have compliance issues.
So, I mean, I know, I also am a lawyer.
Mhm.
Uh, from a legal angle, how does it pan out? From a contractual obligation perspective, you know,
Mhm.
now even if you have a contract which is fully ironclad, blockchain, all of that stuff, but the downstream supplier
Mhm.
is not fully automated, then
Correct.
then does the liability flow into you or does it stop there?
Absolutely. To some extent, it flows to me also because I am, from the end to end perspective, as a larger corporation, I have that responsibility to see the compliance being met at every step down. So, even at the stage of vendor onboarding, I have
Mhm.
to see a proper compliance that the vendor is ought to achieve. Now, if even thereafter the compliance, if the vendor has or the supplier has not achieved those compliances, the very fact that I've done the audit and I'm
Mhm.
still the supplier is still not compliant would definitely bring on some liabilities on me. So contractually speaking, we do draft very strong indemnity clauses, but then the indemnity clauses would not freeze the liability completely on the vendor or the supplier itself, but also percolates to the larger corporations whose duty is more defining at such times.
But indemnity clauses, Gaurav, are essentially reactive. It
Correct.
is post facto,
Hmm.
right? I mean,
Hmm.
even if let's say you have a small supplier and you have an indemnity clause which stipulates, a penalty of $100 million, he doesn't have it. So for him, it is not such a big deal because in any case, he doesn't have $100 million,
Hmm.
right? But the bigger question is that what happens, you know, how do you prevent such occurrences from happening?
There are two perspectives to it. The entire legal system or the judicial system or even the administrative system is more has been engineered in such a way that it has always been more reactive
Yes,
rather than preventive. So
correct.
that's one part of the cultural or the legal way it has how it has been designed. Uh, though over the last 7 8 years, what we've seen from the legal perspective, the government of India has also become more proactive. The biggest example of it is earlier, if you see going back till for last 2 decades, India would always try to propagate a biblical kind of a legal law, right, or a legislation. Now, last 10 years, what the government has realized by the time the technology you would understand and legislate, the the lion has run out of the tunnel, right? So yeah, the sandboxing, the legal sandboxing was one of the innovations. Similarly, you see, to capture whether it can be preventive rather than reactive, the compliances that have been set, though at times extremely excruciating from the economy perspective, economy as in to the financial aspect of the
Yeah.
company,
Right.
uh, uh, people still take chances because it's a huge cost with absolute compliances. And in fact, just like under the Ministry of Electronics and IT, uh, uh, the specific departments have been created who specializes on these specific technologies, right? So they don't legislate, rather they would make rules, regulations, and notifications that caters to the downstream market actually, right? Similarly, yeah, for the compliance perspective, rather than sitting in a closed environment, a need is seen wherein people who actually find are on the cusp of rolling down the compliance part, they should know they are the real people who should actually advise, and that is where the preventive part would be
Mhm.
actually more effective rather than being more theoretical, and being the need is being more practical actually.
But is that happening? I mean, do you see that happening?
uh, I see that happening. If I'm supposed to scale it between 0 to 100, I'll
Mhm.
say at least 65 to 70%. Yes,
That's a pretty
because
good number. Yeah.
at least in terms of awareness,
Okay.
but even that 35 to 30% of a gap is a huge margin, because by the time you even create a secured key so that your data is secure, or your entire infrastructure is secure, somebody out there is there to make a superior, the hammer to break that security. Yeah.
So again, I'm coming from the business part of it more than the technology part of it, and the legal part of it more than the technology part of it.
Mhm.
I've oftentimes seen that we work very well in terms of compliances, in terms of audits, regulatory filings, and all of this stuff when it is export oriented, when the customer is overseas, when the cost of non-compliance is much higher.
Much higher. Correct.
Whereas when we operate in a domestic environment, we tend to look at this as a very onerous cost which can be avoided.
So I think it is also a cultural perspective to it. I'm sorry, this may not directly relate to your question, but I think this is also a little cultural. If we travel outside India, people are always very
Law abiding.
well behaved or cooperative, and the return journey is the most difficult part of it, when people start misbehaving or being a little more
Okay.
unmannered, ill-mannered, right?
In manner,
So
right?
I think it's more cultural, wherein, or maybe it's the cost of penalty of
Yeah.
or punitive implication of being non-compliant when you're exporting your services there, uh, is much more than what in India, within India it is. But then this has to get covered up, basically because uh, the kind of investments now are happening in India, and the growth of the service sector, in especially in terms of services with respect to the IT or IoT, or cybersecurity space, uh, that the quality of service and compliance, I'll
Mhm.
say, has definitely gone up over the years. Has
Okay.
definitely, and to some extent, I'll say it is definitely comparable to international grades.
Okay. See, the problem that oftentimes you have is that just when you have kind of adopted a technology, you kind of reconcile yourself that okay, this is something, this is a cost of doing business, so I have to do this kind of stuff, right? So
Mhm.
it happened with when we moved into ERP, and people said, okay, this is the cost of doing business, right?
Mhm.
Then we moved into the internet, and they said, okay, this is something that we have to do. Now, just when we have moved into industrial automation, IoT, shop floor automation, all of that stuff,
Mhm.
suddenly you have this animal called AI that's coming, which is trying to sweep everything away and
Correct.
put in a new system.
Correct.
Now, my question is that is it going to be on top of whatever investments that have been made? Is it going to be replacement cost? What is going to happen to the already battered ROI use cases that we had?
Mhm. So you see, a couple of things over here. The ARP days, it will take us back to almost 20 years ago, right? When the problems were that if you make an entry, then even if you want to erase it or want to amend it, even that changes would get recorded. And those changes being recorded was a irksome thing for the accounts or the compliance team, right? Because they would like, because everything on paper and pen could be erased or removed. But
Correct.
when it comes to ERP, that would record. So that was the stage of irkness those days. Now, when we are talking of more automations and with AI being implemented and deployed, with the human interference, with the human confluence with that, uh, I'll see that the companies, rather than more automation, are giving opportunities to the resources for skill enhancement. The
Okay.
idea is not to to be replaceable, but to enhance your skill in such a way how you would bring the use of the AI and how
Mhm.
skillfully you would do that. So the ROI of the company is maybe what notes from the legal industry perspective, what ideally an associate or a senior associate or a partner would take 1 day or a 2 day to draft a notice. From basic instructions to the AI, the framework would be ready in, say, 2 minutes or maybe 1 minute, which definitely requires a human intervention to upscale the product. And this is where, the skill part comes, how to use it and how to use it effectively. And that's where the companies are looking for the ROI. It is not about downscaling the number of resources. It's about upscaling the resources.
But the hard truth, Gaurav, is still the fact that if you have 100 people, you're going to be upscaling all of them. But at the end of the day, you will be able to upscale and utilize about 30 of them because Claude is already doing 70s.
So, you see, the thing is, it you're absolutely correct. But how much of the resource is trainable is also the question mark over here. Uh, the thing is, we had experiences ourselves wherein few associates would, without application of mind, would just use Claude or ChatGPT, start drafting and send it to us for iterations, and putting the last knife before sending it to the client. At the end of the day, it was completely us again redrafting it. So finally,
Exactly.
we had to let go those resources and tell them that rather than paying you 10 times more, I would rather get a subscription at a higher grade of the same tool that you are trying to use on a free cost, right? Now the thing is, it is the willingness of the resources also to upscale. What most of the resources are doing is they are themselves becoming replaceable by the tools. That is not
Okay.
the thing. The thing is how to skill up your, and how to command that very tool in such a way that it enhances your skill set. That is more important. And that is where most 70 out of, like you mentioned, out of 130 can be upskilled, right? That's the gap where the 70 are not understanding that it is how it is up to them to upskill themselves, not to get replaced by the tools.
But having said that, and I completely agree with you that it is at the end of the day,
Mm.
it is the individual's responsibility to reskill, upskill the.
Correct.
But have we kind of pretty much reached the place where you know employability is probably going to be more important than the sheer number of warm bodies that we've been dealing with over the last 75 years.
So, I think this has been a question mark since ages. The employability not only of the resources but also of technology. How that technology would be employed by the resources themselves, and how the fusion between them will happen. So, if I am correct, what I've read, the only job that has been lost over the years because of all the technological development is the job of a lift operator. Right. So it's about as I said earlier, I would reiterate, its employability is at every stage, whether not only about the resources and the number of them, but also technology. Earlier, a typewriter or a typist would be important today, or a peon in a law office would be important, who would take dictations from the lawyer. Today, the lawyers are themselves typing out the entire petitions. Now,
True.
the thing is, even those peons who would take dictations have upscaled themselves somewhere and got fit into the entire ecosystems with upgraded skill set. If not, then lost the job completely.
Which means that you are talking about an ecosystem which necessarily must have the capacity to absorb
Yes,
these people,
absolutely.
right?
Absolutely.
Because if it doesn't, then we have a problem.
Absolutely. And the absorption has to be more being understood by the resources on which these technology or the tools are being applied.
Okay. Got a last question.
Yes.
And this is something a little more, I would say more philosophical.
Mm-hmm.
But when I went through the interview, see, every time we talk about, you know, deployment of technology,
Mm-hmm.
there are two use cases that I broadly see.
Mm-hmm.
One is the one which says this technology can save costs.
Mm-hmm.
And that has been the narrative for majority of the technology deployments.
Correct.
On the other hand, you have another set which says this technology can help increase revenues, right? So one is a cost argument, one is
Uh,
a revenue argument.
So, just to give you a very fine example on this, I was part of one of the investment committee, which was screening few startups who
Mhm.
were displaying their products, right? So, one of the investors asked a very fine question. What is the usability of the innovation that you are talking of? The use Every innovation is not usable. Every
Correct.
innovation need is can be a very useless innovation also, right?
Mhm.
So when we talk of innovation, we must appreciate that it must capture two parts. First is the revenue part, and the second is the usability part, which enhances the revenue. So if it is implemented or deployed with ease, because technology is not to complicate. It is rather more usable if it makes our working easier and faster, right? So the moment the technology is adopted or maybe innovated in such a way that makes things easier and faster, the revenue will obviously go up, because you are scaling up the quality as well as the performance of the individual, and that's where technology is rather useful.
But most narratives talk about costs. They say save costs, reduce costs, optimize costs. You know,
Uh, there is a very fine saying that in Hindi it says, "Mehenga roye ek bar, sasta roye bar bar." So, if the cost of adoption, right, may be a little higher, but if is useful from the prediction of it, right, that the usability of it, then I think the in the long run, just the adoption cost should not be should not be a maybe the decision can be slow, or maybe it can delay the decision, but at the end of the day, it is an important decision to take.
do you think that the small companies, the mid-sized companies, which are finding cost to be a major impediment, do
So
you think they?
I'll give you an example from our own case study. Uh, when we finalize the agreements or the documents for the clients,
Mhm.
there is always this the last moment confusion whether this is the last version or this is the agreed version, right? And before the agreement is signed by my client, we always have this thing that whether this has been legally verified or not. And how
Mhm.
do we verify that? Now, what we did was we have adopted a particular technology that ascribes a particular scan code to the document, which,
Mhm.
when scanned, immediately tells my client saying that yes, this has been verified by the legal team. Now, the cost of this implementation would come to around 11 rupees per scan code, right?
Mhm.
Now, on the long run, the number of agreements that we are processing for our clients will scale up the cost, but cost of one scan code is still achievable. So if we distribute it judiciously, maybe the initial cost of procurement may be high, but overall distribution with the clients would cover up my cost. So the way how you would implement and deploy and distribute the cost is something that needs to be taken care of.
Okay. I said that was the last question, but this is the last question. I promise you that. And this got nothing to do with this. But, DPDP has been talked about for several weeks, months, years now. Okay. And there was a consultative paper that was set out. There were views that came up. What is your view on DPDP, both in terms of release and in terms of adoption? Is it going to make our life complicated, or is it going to make things simple?
As I say, you see, DPDPA is silent and leaves a lot of interpretation at times, which becomes a little difficult while adopting or being compliant with. Say, I'll give you a very fine example. When DPDPA says on a particular level, you'll have to appoint a DPO, that is the Data Protection Officer.
Data Protection Officer.
It doesn't define what is the qualification that a DPO must have to get appointed as a DPO. Most of the companies are appointing lawyers, that is their GCs or CFOs, as DPOs. Are they even qualified to be a DPO? Do they understand the technology or the nitty-gritties of it? Now, these are the gap points that from the practical aspects that we have seen in DPDPA. People are all gaga and they speak very nicely. They speak a lot about DPDPA. It is definitely an important legislation which protects the individual's data, right? Even to the extent of at times the individuals in a company. But what about government companies? Are they covered in this? That's point number one. Point number two. There are certain restrictions of data being moved outside the country.
Outside the country, yes.
Anonymization of the data or pseudonymization of data is something that we need to get it done, implemented before we do that. To what degree? That is quite. So you see, there are certain parts in which DPDPA is very effective, but on the nitty-gritties of it, when actually it comes down on the practical scale of deployment and implementation, is the gap.
So essentially what you're saying is that as and when it comes into practice, then there's going to be a lot of job for the courts.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of scope of interpretations in between the lines, which the company may adopt as the best policy, but later on it just where the government of India fills in those gaps may be very contrary to those. So in that context, DPDPA needs to be more affirmative at times.
Gaurav Sahai, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. I wish we could have spent more time because, I love discussing about legal issues and, technology, but unfortunately we have a clock that's sticking out there. But thank you once again for joining us, and we hope to see you soon. Thank you very much.
And it was a pleasure speaking to you, and I hope to meet you soon in person as well.
Thank you. Bye, Gaurav.
Thank you. Bye. Bye.